Okay, so people are furious and rightfully calling for the resignation of Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas, for meeting with a traitor who was sentenced to life in prison for being a traitor to the U.S. government, Jonathan Pollard. Apparently what happened was he met with him in July. It was a secret meeting. It's just now come out. The New York Times has reported on it. That Jonathan Pollard had a meeting with Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Jonathan Pollard worked as a civilian analyst for U.S. naval intelligence, where he had access to a lot of classified materials. Starting in 1984, he systematically passed large volumes, about 800 classified documents and around 1,500 intelligence summaries containing sensitive military, technical, and strategic information to Israel. He was a spy working in the U.S. government for Israel, and he was passing state secrets to Israel. He did this in exchange for small payments, but he said his real motivation was support for Israel. Records show that he received maybe $35,000, $45,000 a year. He had agreed to a 10-year, kind of 30, 40 grand a year sort of pay structure, but really he was doing it because he was supporting the state of Israel. So he was arrested in November of 1985. Him and his wife attempted to flee. They tried to get into the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., where they were hoping to seek asylum, but instead they were arrested just outside of the embassy. And in 1987, Pollard accepted a plea deal and pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to deliver national defense information to a foreign government. That should have given him about 2 to 5 years, I believe, 2 to 4 years in jail. However, the judge reviewed the damaging assessments of the highly classified information. So clearly people probably, there was some serious issues with what the judge saw. And after reviewing the highly classified damage assessments, the judge gave Pollard a life sentence, citing the gravity of the national security harm caused. And his wife received a 5-year sentence. Well, Jonathan Pollard, who was a traitor to the U.S. government, an absolute traitor, spying for a foreign country as an American citizen, spying for a foreign country, giving our state secrets to a foreign country. He served 30 years in prison, the longest sentence ever served in the U.S. for passing information to an ally. This is what they say. This is how they frame it. Now, pay attention to this, because Mike Huckabee has been advocating for this guy for decades now, for at least a decade. Mike Huckabee has been saying, release him, release him. Why? Well, he was only passing information to an ally. But is Israel our ally, really? Because Israel's looking more and more like an enemy. So because they use this kind of rhetoric, well, he was spying on an ally, he was just passing information. We normally give information to Israel. So what does it really matter? Does he really need a life sentence for passing information behind our government's back without clearance to do so? Should he really get a life sentence for this when we share all kinds of intelligence with Israel? This isn't a crime. Israel's Israel's just us. We are Israel. And so Donald Trump basically made sure he was released. He had advocated for his release. He was paroled in 2015 after completing 5 years on parole. He was then allowed to move to Israel, where he has since lived. Now, let me just show you what it was like when he arrived in Israel. There he is being greeted by Netanyahu himself. He was given a hero's welcome when he went to Israel. Look at him kissing the ground because he was working for the state of Israel. He was an absolute traitor to the country. And now Mike Huckabee, the former Arkansas governor, and most recently he's the U.S. ambassador to Israel under Donald Trump, has long advocated for Pollard's release, making public statements as far back as 2011, saying, got to let this guy out. He was just helping Israel, and Israel's our friend. It's okay. And now they've met. They've met. They've met. This is what Jonathan Pollard had to say about his meeting with Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee sitting down with a man who's been convicted of being a traitor to the American government, a traitor to the American people. And an ambassador to Israel sits down with him, gives him a warm welcome. And this is what Pollard has to say about his meeting.
You met with Ambassador Mike Huckabee. Why did you meet with him?
I had reached out to him through my lawyers for a meeting. Why? It was a very simple personal reason. On the one hand, I wanted to thank him as honestly as I could for everything that he had done on my behalf when I was in prison. And on the other hand, I wanted to extend my heartfelt appreciation for his kindness and his consideration towards my wife, Esther, Alea Shalom. He really was a gentleman towards her, and he tried to help her as much as he could. That basically was my reason for wanting to see him. Now, were other things discussed? There were pleasantries discussed, but those were the only matters of substance that transpired between us. Now, when I was contacted bolt out of the blue by the New York Times, I was somewhat surprised because they're a newspaper that I don't exactly like, and never in my wildest dreams would consider giving an interview. But something told me it was important that I do talk to them. And after discussing, my possible run for the Knesset, the subject of the interview became very clear, and that was the Huckabee meeting. Now, it was very clear to me, Daniel, that there was somebody in the embassy who had contacted a superior, perhaps, back in Washington, and that person had contacted the New York Times. It was clear that whoever contacted or made this meeting, that made their superior in Washington aware of the meeting, didn't know the substance of the meeting. They were not privy to the meeting. They weren't present, and they really hadn't heard anything about it, except for the fact that the meeting had been held. It was clear to me also at the time of the interview that the meeting was going to be used as a weapon against the ambassador, perhaps to have him recalled.
You're actually
and I
seeing
got
that
this from the
on
substance
Twitter right now.
of the interview. Right. It's quite clear. In my guess, as far as who may have been involved in this matter, I think is centered on the CIA station at the embassy.
I would guess
they really haven't been replaced.
I would guess that the CIA station probably hates you.
Yeah, and when they became aware of it, I think they organized this hit on the ambassador. You have to understand, I have a lot of disagreements with President Trump, but there's one thing that we're both in agreement on, and that is that the CIA needs to be purged completely from top to bottom, from leftist progressive holdovers going back to the Obama administration, certainly the Biden administration. I don't trust the CIA. They're not friends of Israel. I know this, unfortunately, from personal experience. And so this story now is, I believe, part of their effort to have the ambassador removed.
And so now a traitor to America is giving advice to Donald Trump to keep Mike Huckabee in office, saying Mike Huckabee is doing more for the United States-Israel relationship than anyone else. I'm paraphrasing, but something along those lines. And the U.S. government is getting advice from a traitor who's also sitting down with an ambassador to Israel, with a U.S. ambassador, a governor. I mean, a governor is actually a higher title than ambassador, Mike Huckabee's daughter is current governor of Arkansas. He was the former governor of Arkansas. Now he's the ambassador to Israel. How many times do we need to be punched in the face before we realize we're being abused? How many times does this have to happen to us? How brainwashed do we have to believe that, well, Israel's just our ally and so it's all okay? You know, for the fact that they even let this guy out of jail and let him return to Israel, where he kissed the ground and Netanyahu said, "You're home," and gave him a hero's welcome for spying on the United States. For spying. If Israel was really an ally, then Israel would have said to Jonathan Pollard, "You didn't need to do that. That wasn't good. You broke the law. You went against one of our allies. We condemn that. You are not getting a hero's welcome here. You're a criminal. I'm glad you're out. You know, go and live your life, you know, just right off in the sunset." But shouldn't be giving him a hero's welcome, saying you're home, greeting him personally on the tarmac when his plane landed. That is a punch in the face. How many punches in the face are we going to take before we realize that we are completely and utterly being abused? It's just shocking. So many are calling for the resignation of Mike Huckabee. I agree. He absolutely should resign. He is, I think the question of Mike Huckabee's loyalty, I think that's a fair game to question at this point. If he's been advocating for the release of Jonathan Pollard since 2011 on record. In fact, let me show you this. This is Huckabee talking about Pollard back in the day. Look at how young Mike Huckabee is in this.
Governor Huckabee joins the recent calls to act in benefit of Jonathan Pollard, who has spent more than 25 years in U.S. prison for spying for Israel.
He pled guilty. He served an extraordinary length of time for the crime that he was convicted of, to which he pled guilty. And it would seem to now be, I think, a matter of goodwill and a good faith gesture for the president to give clemency and release him.
How long has Mike Huckabee been on the take for Israel? I mean, it looks like clearly a very long time to say, well, you know, it'd be an act of good faith. We should let him go. It'd be good. An act of good faith for Israel to what? Release the guy that they sicked on us to spy? I mean, this is just, he should resign. Donald Trump should demand it. But Donald Trump is largely responsible for, well, Pollard was, essentially what happened was he was up for parole, and the Trump administration made it really clear that they were wanting him to go and be paroled. So he was sentenced to life, but at the 30-year mark, he was allowed to be paroled. The Trump administration essentially advocated for his parole and also then allowed for him to run off to Israel, where he could kiss the ground and be welcomed home by Netanyahu himself. So the Trump administration is also clearly, this is just, again, I can't get over this. I just can't get over how blatantly, obviously, just unabashedly that our government is working for the state of Israel for whatever means. And that is what we need to be all asking. Why are we doing this? What is the real reason? And don't tell me it's because the Jewish people are so special. You know, God said that they're the chosen ones and they're special, so we must just do whatever it is they want, including harming our own national security. Anything they ask for, we got to give them. Anything because God said. I don't want to hear that excuse. There is clearly something else going on here. And that is why many of us are demanding the release of the Epstein files. We want to know, what is it that's going on here? What is it? It cannot possibly just be this fervent belief in, you know, Jesus is coming back when the Jews all gather in Jerusalem. And when that day happens, then, and if we have to murder a bunch of children to get there, then that's what Jesus wants. Jesus wants us to murder all the Palestinian babies so that the Jews can take over the land and Jesus can come back. I mean, that is just a delusional, there's just no way. I really just don't know how anybody could honestly believe, if they're Christian, that when they die, they're going to meet Jesus, and Jesus is going to say, you know what, good for you for killing all those Palestinian kids. You did the right thing. Those babies, yeah, I'm just so glad you let them starve to death in that NICU where they just were found rotting. That is good, my child. Good. That is just not going to happen. So it just can't possibly be that deranged belief. It's got to be something else. And that is what we need to get to the bottom of, or we don't. You know, honestly, maybe we don't need to get to the bottom of it. Maybe we just need to say, we don't care. We're voting you out. If you stand with Israel, you're done. You have to stand with the United States. The United States or bust. That's got to be it. And I think that is going to be moving forward. I think that's going to be a big, huge issue in the midterms. And I also think in the next election cycle, I don't see Republicans will not win at this point with the way that they're going, just paying homage to Israel nonstop and sitting down with traitors and waving an Israeli flag and saying, if you don't stand with this and if you don't want to sit down with this traitor, then you yourself, you're just an anti-Semite. Well, what about being an anti-American? Anti-Americanite? What about being that? Anti-Americanite? That's worse. At least it should be. If you're a true blue, red-blooded American, the worst thing you could be would be a traitor, and even worse, an American governor, ambassador sitting down with that traitor. Just unbelievable. Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.